All right, Combathletes all over the world, welcome again to another installment. If you're watching this on the YouTube channel, congratulations, you're in the right place. Click subscribe so that you constantly get updated when we drop new knowledge bomb courses like this to help you with your strength and conditioning for combat sports performance. And if you're in the Skool group, Combathletes Worldwide, congratulations, you're now officially part of the best freaking combat sports community in the world, where we're dropping loads of free courses, loads of free resources to help you on your way with your S&C for combat sport. Why? Because it's a minefield out there. There's so much rubbish information. We actually use this stuff day in, day out with our athletes. And so we know it works. Okay, skin in the game. Who am I? My name is Coach Harry. It is my job to help amateur combat sports athletes, amateurs on their way to the professional leagues, and professional combat sports athletes with their strength and conditioning. I help them train pain-free. I help them build strength, and I help them weaponize their gas tanks, all without spending endless hours in the weight room. I'm a grappler as well. I have skin in the game. I compete. I'm a brown belt. Been doing this for quite some time. And if you're not already following me at Combathlete Arena on Instagram, make sure you do. I'll always try and help you with your training in the DMs. You can ask me questions about your training, and make sure you follow the feed, because that's where we post about the latest releases for these kind of courses, new videos, free programs, etc. So what are we going to talk about today? One of my heroes here, Mr. Bruce Lee. This was actually my first introduction to this concept back when I was a kid. How to improve your mobility. It can be a complicated topic. It doesn't need to be, okay? Similar to energy systems development. It can be so complicated. Oh, there's so much science. There's so much conflicting information. What should I do? It's actually not that difficult once you understand what to do. And it's the same with mobility. We're going to talk about today specifically how to improve the mobility in the hips and the shoulders quickly. Okay, why quickly? We haven't got hours to spend. Okay, when I work with my athletes in a one-to-one setting, I might only see them twice a week for an hour each time. That's only 2 hours per week. When I work with my guys online, they might be getting their 2 sessions in per week. We get a check-in once a week. Okay, we haven't got hours to spend on getting these high kicks, or being able to put our legs behind our heads, or hold a prayer position behind our back, or whatever our standards might be. We haven't got the time. Okay, so we're going to talk about how to do it quickly today. So make sure you take notes, especially if you're confused about what we should be doing. Right, let's make sure we're on the same page then and talk about what actually is mobility. What are we aiming for? Because it gets thrown around all the time, okay, in the online world, especially in the internet, but we need a definition. So let's define it. It is the capacity of a joint, okay, shoulder joint, hip joint, elbow joint, knee joint, to move through its full range of motion, okay, actively with tension. So think of this as you moving you, okay. Let's give some examples. High kicks, okay, you moving your leg to a high kick position. Shoulder external rotation, which I can show you here on my camera, okay. I have to actively pull my knuckles behind me to externally rotate my shoulder joint, okay. So this is an example of external shoulder rotation mobility, because I'm actively putting my shoulder through that range of motion, okay. If you have excellent mobility, you'll be able to execute the joint through its full textbook range of motion. If you have poor mobility, which we see from time to time with some of my grapplers, some of my strikers, some of my MMA fighters, we might have to work on that to improve the mobility. We assess, we test, we can see that it's poor, and we need to improve it, okay? Now, mobility is slightly different then to flexibility, okay? Often people are like, oh, I need to get more flexible, or I need to get more mobile, thinking it's the same thing. Not quite. Flexibility is the ability of tissue, your ligaments, your muscles, to stretch passively. So what does that mean? That means an external force is moving you now. Here's a great example. You've probably had a go at this stretch after training. Your training partner helps you get into a position. So your training partner is the external force, and they're moving you or assisting you into a position, okay? And you're kind of relaxed in this picture, okay? That's flexibility, okay? Now, you do need flexibility. Of course you do. But in terms of time-saving ability, mobility is what we want to aim for when we're limited with time, okay? And I'm going to show you how to do this quickly and effectively today. So what's the protocol that we use at Combathlete, okay? We actually use weights to improve our mobility. I know, it's a shock, but we do, okay? We use light weights to begin with. We're going to talk about how that works. And then we use tension through range of motion, okay? We use active tension. We are, contracting our muscles to do this. This is not passive. This is active. Yes, it can be hard work, but it sticks. It means the gains transfer to your combat sport, okay? We'll talk about how that works. And then frequency. How often should you do this stuff? How are you going to fit it all in? Okay, we haven't got time to be doing 3 1-hour purely focused sessions on mobility per week. You just haven't got the time. Okay, so we need to make sure we get the frequency right and we're doing this enough times throughout the week for it to work. Okay, so let's have a look at how this breaks down. So why should we use weights to improve our mobility? Okay, really simple. We want the muscles surrounding the target joint, okay, to be strong and flexible, and we don't have a lot of time. Okay, so Rosenfeld and his crew, only last year actually, did a study where they concluded that it is recommended to use large ranges of motion resistance training exercises to improve hip and lower back extensor flexibility and muscle strength. Okay, now especially if you're a grappler, lower back and hip extensors are really, really important to train. Why? Because you're very often in a flexed position when you're grappling, and so the extensor muscles don't get that much training from the sport itself. So in the weight room, you want to be spending time on lower back and hip extensor flexibility and muscle strength. But we know, especially from this study that I'm talking about, using weights helps get you there in a way that's super efficient. It gets you more flexible and strong, all in one, 2 birds with 1 stone. So weights is the most efficient way to do this. There's lots of ways to do it, but we're interested in efficiency, efficacy, and speed of results. Okay, we want this stuff to move as quickly, as safely, and as sensibly as possible in the human body. So that's why we're going to use weights. Okay, we need the joints to be strong. Okay, we need the muscles to support those joints and the muscles around the joint to be strong. So that's why. Why not static passive stretching? That image on the slide a couple of slides ago where the partner is pulling the guy forwards. Why not that version? That's what we've seen, isn't it? After training sessions, you see guys stretching out like that with their partners. I'll tell you why. Have a think about this, just from a purely, logical stance. What part of combat sports are static and passive? Okay. If someone's holding you up against the fence in the cage, that might look static, but it's certainly active. Okay, they are squeezing. Isometrics, we use them all the time. They're awesome. They're static, but they're active. Okay, there's nothing that is static and passive. There is nothing, unless you've been knocked out. That might be a good example. You're stationary, you're still, and you're not moving. Okay, but the actual activity of combat sport, the fighting component, the competing component, it is active. It just is active. There is no static and passive. So why would we want to prepare our muscles in a static and passive manner? Just logically, it doesn't make sense. We also know from various studies that dynamic stretching, i.e. moving with muscular tension and movement, right, can improve power. There's studies that show this, okay? Lots of studies have shown that passive static stretching decreases power, okay? We're in a combat sports. We need power. So we don't want to be using modalities that decrease that. So that's why we don't do static passive stretching on the whole list of modalities that we can use to improve mobility, to improve flexibility. We're not going to use static passive stretching. Where might we use it? After a hard training session to restore a working muscle to its original length, okay? Often if you're training, let's say you're doing loads of kicks in a Muay Thai session, those muscles involved are going to get shortened because they're active and they're being used. You could do some static passive stretching at the end of that session to help lengthen the muscle back to its resting length. That's fine. But don't spend all your time doing that thinking it's going to improve your mobility. It's not. It's just going to help you calm down after a training session, really. So static passive stretching is low on the priority list for improving mobility quickly. Right, so on this idea of using weights then, stage 1 on the protocol, we're going to use just enough weight in the beginning to trigger some tension in the muscle. Okay, the cool thing about weights is when you hold them, your muscles have to activate to hold them, otherwise you drop the weight. Okay, start light on all this stuff. We can build it over time in terms of how much weight we're going to use, but we need to start light. Okay, so let's use 2 examples for hips and shoulders. I just want to keep it simple today. Okay, these images are a bit, they're a bit on the kind of, gooner fitness side, but they illustrate their point well. That's why I've used them. So we're going to look at the lateral split squat. We use the lateral split squat all the time for hip mobility, also for ankle mobility a little bit as well. It's very scalable in terms of how much weight we can use. Okay, and then shoulders, the elbow on the external rotations, but it also actually goes into a bit of internal rotation here when my forearm goes past 90 degrees. Okay, these are 2 exercises we use all the time. They're loadable with weight. They're very effective. We get results very quickly with these. Okay, so we need to use just enough weight in the beginning to trigger tension. As an example, for the lateral split squat, it could be a 5 to 10 pound plate or a 5 kilogram plate held in front of you. Okay, for counterbalance initially in the beginning. For the shoulders, a simple 2.5 to 5 pound weight or a 2 kilo weight. Okay, and we're going to build up from there. So these are some examples of exercises that we use, and they work really, really well. And if you're not sure where to start with these. Okay, so stage 2 then is we need active tension through full range of motion. This is also known as strength training. Surprise, surprise, but strength training through a full range of motion. You need a standard, guys, to aim for. Okay, a lot of the time when people are doing mobility training or they want to improve their mobility, they're not aiming for anything specific. They're just kind of winging it, right? Oh, I guess I'll feel the improvements at some point. Not good enough. At Combathlete, we have standards. There is stuff to aim for. So what are the standards comprised of? How much ROM is required? Okay, how much range of motion do you need? Do you need what the textbook says? Or do you just need 5% better than what you've currently got? Okay. What I've learned over the years in coaching is actually trying to make athletes like the textbook is a waste of time. I need to know what is the 20% of limitations in the mobility of their body that's going to contribute to 80% performance enhancing results. Okay, that might be improving their shoulder external rotation just by a couple of degrees. Okay, 5-10%. That's fine, but we need a standard nonetheless. So what are you aiming for? When you sign up with Combathlete, we help you figure this out. And then with how much load, what's the standard we want to get to? Do we just need to do it with 5 pounds? Do we need to do it with 100 pounds? Do we need to do it with 300 pounds? What is the load requirement or the standard of how much you need to move through that range of motion in terms of weight? So let's look at the lateral split squat then. So we want below 90 degrees in terms of range of motion. Pretty much this position here. Okay, and by below 90 degrees, I mean the angle at the knee joint. By below 90 degrees, I mean the angle at the knee joint here. Okay, so the hips in line with the kneecap, if not slightly below. That's what we're aiming for in terms of depth. Okay, now sometimes the ankles might be the restricting factor here. We can either boost the ankle up on a little plate or lifting shoes help with this if that is the limiting factor, but we're using this predominantly to address hip mobility. What are we aiming for then? Reps, 3 sets of 8 reps each side at 0.4 times body weight eventually. Okay, and the barbell is the most effective way to get 0.4 times body weight. Holding that in a goblet formation is not great, okay, because the arms get tired. We want the barbell, back squat position with the barbell, 0.4 times body weight. That's what we're aiming for 3 sets of 8 per side, roughly a 2-minute rest between sets. So that is our standard for the lateral split squat. Okay, what about the shoulder rotations then? What are we aiming for with these? So again, below 90 degrees, like I was talking about earlier, this would be 90. Okay, we want to go below that because we want to get into internal rotation as much as external rotation. Okay, so trying to get below 90 degrees here. 3 sets of 20 reps each side. Okay, at 10% of our bench 1 rep max. Okay, so if I can bench 200 pounds for a 1 rep max, I want to be able to get 3 sets of 20 reps with 20 pounds on each shoulder. Okay, and that's the standard we're aiming for. We're aiming to hit these top numbers over 3 to 6 months. Okay, mobility gains can be very fast depending on what's the limiting factor. They can also be quite slow. So if you think about it in 3 to 6 months and you chip away at these standards for 3 to 6 months, these 2 exercises, for example, you will get really good results in 6 months' time if you're aiming for these standards and you're sensibly increasing the load or increasing the range of motion over time. And we help you with that at Combathlete. We We have all the metrics set up for that and the coaching to guide you through that process. Okay, so make sure you've got standards for what you're trying to achieve. It makes hitting the goals much, much more probable. Okay, so what about frequency then? Let's keep it simple. Frequency, how often have you got to do this stuff for it to stick? 1 to 2 times per week. And during your lifting sessions is the most efficient way to do this. Okay, so in terms of categorization, your accessory lifts can include exercises to improve your mobility. Okay, so if you have back squat programmed one day as your main compound lift, a lateral split squat is a great addition to have further down the list in your training session as an accessory to the back squat, but also to improve your mobility as a byproduct. Super efficient way to program this. Okay, if you have bench press as your compound lift in one of your sessions, doing the elbow on knee shoulder external rotations is a great accessory to include later down in the session. Sometimes we even use this as a pre kind of warm up move, warm up exercise before benching as well on a bench day. Okay, you might have trap bar deadlift programmed on one day as a compound lift, and then a stiff legged, here is a deficit stiff leg deadlift as an accessory. Okay, really testing the hamstrings and the glutes and the lower back erectors. Another option for a front squat or a back squat or a Zercher squat compound lift at the start of your session is a deficit Bulgarian split squat, okay, as an accessory further down the list in the session. There's loads of different exercises that we use to address mobility as an accessory category at the same time in our programming. This is just, these are just 4 examples here, but we have loads that we use that are really effective and also dependent on your level. What you might find as a beginner, level 2 athlete, for example, is that a deficit stiff leg deadlift is not actually necessary to improve, deep hip flexion mobility. And we would start you on a far simpler progression. But the point being, you can include in your robustness sessions mobility and stability-based exercises depending on what's necessary. In this case, we're talking about mobility. So if you struggle with mobility, 1 or 2 mobility-focused exercises in the robustness session goes a long, long way. Okay. Now, the most time-efficient way to do this, frequency-wise, is to do it 1 to 2 times per week per area, and do it during your lifting period. So like here, we're talking about your accessories. Doing it at the end of your lifting session would be the smartest way to do it. If you do it any less than once per week, the frequency isn't going to be strong enough for you to get the adaptation fast enough. It will take you ages, if at all. Twice a week is where we see the best results. If we hammer an area twice a week at the end of a lifting session with full range of motion, mobility focused, the results show, and it works really, really well. Sometimes we even go 3 times per week if necessary, okay, where it would be twice a week in a lifting session, and then in the robustness add-on, it would also get thrown in there as well. Okay, so that's the efficient way of doing it, robustness and accessories. And hopefully that was really helpful for you guys. If it was, send it to a training partner that struggles with mobility, or someone that's spending hours doing inefficient mobility routines every week, but they're not lifting through full ranges of motion with their strength work. Send them this video. Hopefully it's going to help them. And if you've got any questions, you can always ask in the comments below. I'll do my best to answer, or at least point you in the right direction. You can always message me on Instagram as well if you've got any questions there. Make sure then that you join Combathletes Worldwide, the Skool group, if you haven't already. Loads of courses in there now. I think this is course number 7 that we've put up for free to help you guys. So make sure that you join. It's free to join. Okay, there's a link in the description below if you're watching this on YouTube. And you get a free performance call with me when you join the Skool group. Now, why is that? Why would I give my time away for free to jump on a call with you? Really simple. And I've said it before in previous videos. I do believe a good coach can change or influence positively the trajectory of an athlete's future course in combat sport with 1 phone call. Okay, and I'm giving away those phone calls for free. 10 to 15 minute chat on the phone. How can I help you? And I'll try and give you some value, some advice, some knowledge from a coach with real skin in the game. Why? Because I do this day in, day out. Okay, and we have the results to prove it. Make sure you follow at Combathlete Arena then on Instagram. So again, you can ask questions in the DMs. Keep an eye on, our feed for what's getting released in terms of courses, in terms of coaching results and exciting announcements. And I hope this has been useful. I hope you've enjoyed it. My name's Coach Harry. I'll see you on the next one.